Last May, I went to the hospital for an ultrasound to confirm that the lump I'd found in my breast was something innocuous, like a cyst. I wound up spending the entire day undergoing multiple rounds of scans, mammograms, and finally a biopsy. The results wouldn't be in for a few days, but on my way out, bandaged and an ice pack shoved inside my bra, I stopped the radiologist and asked her what sort of benign condition she thought this might be. Benign? She looked at me. If I had to put money on it, I'd say it was cancer. I flew to Vegas the next morning for a work conference. I was in Caesar's Palace when the doctor called with the results. I stood at a large window overlooking sunbathers sprawled out at the adult pool. In a daze, I watched their tan, topless bodies glistening in the blinding sunlight as I heard the doctor's voice confirming what I'd instinctively known ever since finding the lump, that the cells were malignant, that I had breast cancer. I can't have cancer, I'm in Vegas, I told the doctor. He prescribed a shot of tequila, and that night I followed doctor's orders, repeatedly. The average age of diagnosis is 62. I was 30 years below that, and the doctors estimated that the stage 2 tumor had been growing inside me for over a decade. I had what the doctors dubbed an old lady tumor. Made sense, as I did relish nights in curled up with a good book and a mug of chamomile tea. Needless to say, I didn't do any gambling in Vegas. I was pretty sure the odds were not in my favor. The following week was a whirlwind of appointments. Surgical oncologist, medical oncologist, radiation oncologist, plastic surgeon, genetic counselor. There was an immediate avalanche of decisions to be made, and quickly. And every choice would affect the rest of my life and could determine if I'd even have much of the rest of my life at all. In a crazed bout of endless Google research in the middle of the night, I came across a terrible website called Cancer Math. You enter your age and the stats of your tumor, and it generates what is cheerfully called a mortality number. Essentially, it gives you your chances of dying. You can choose how the results are displayed, which I thought was a nice touch. Line plot, bar graph, pie chart, whatever form of data display you preferred. I was in a pictogram kind of mood. I hit enter, and 77 green, smiling faces popped up. They represented who would survive in 10 years. Then there were the 21 red, frowny faces. They did not look so happy. 2 yellow ones didn't look too thrilled either. They were the ones who would die from other causes. 77% sounded decent. Definitely could be worse. Although, and I'm not very good with math, but didn't that mean I had a 1 in 5 chance of dying from my cancer? Put that way, it did not sound as promising. I realized at that moment why this information is meant to be shared with you by a professional, someone who could spin the numbers in a hopeful, optimistic sort of way. Although the odds appeared encouraging, who's to say that I'd be one of the lucky ones? There weren't a lot of red, sad faces, but they were there, all miserable and depressed looking after all they were dead. There had to be somebody. Why not me? Cancer math sucked me into a black hole of doom for a few days. Then my oncologist hit me with something that distracted me from my morbid thoughts and threw me into a totally different tailspin. She told me I needed to look into freezing my eggs. She said it was necessary because the treatments, or simply the time I'd have to wait until it was safe to have children, could rob me of my fertility or greatly reduce it. Fertility that, at my age, was already probably diminishing, even without the aid of cancer. I was already very well aware of this. My mother helpfully brought it to my attention every time she called to inform me that yet another cousin was engaged or a family friend pregnant, and reminded me, in case I had forgotten, that I did not yet have a man who loved me, and my uterus remained empty. Suddenly, this future family that I had very vague notions of, half-formed ideas and hopes for, had to be dealt with now. There was no sitting back and trusting that things would just fall into place and turn out for the best. I had to plan for the future of my potential children, take action so there could be future children. Well, at the same time, I wasn't even so sure about my own future. But if I was going to live, I wanted a family. and I didn't want cancer to take that away from me. So I found myself early one morning, flat on my back, shivering. I had no pants on. I glanced down. A small crowd of people gazed intently between my legs, which were propped up awkwardly, knees bent in the air. Dr. Schumanke moved the ultrasound probe between my legs, my feet resting in stirrups on either side of his head. A black and white image on a monitor showed blobs shifting across the screen, my follicles. This particular group of medical students was visiting from China. The doctor had asked me before the exam, did I mind if they observed? Well, sure, I said, why not? They came all the way from China, after all. We don't want to send them home without a show. So once the doctor, the students, a couple nurses, various medical staff, janitorial crew, and random passersby were sufficiently familiar with my hoo-ha, I pulled my pants back on and joined Dr. Schumanke in his office. I grilled him like he was under investigation. When can we start? Right away. How many eggs does it take to insure a child? On average 20, but nothing is ever guaranteed. Then the most important question, how many eggs will I get? I was seeking solid numbers here. I needed math. I can't say. It can vary from person to person, from month to month, depending on a lot of factors. Clearly, egg retrieval was not an exact science, and like many men I knew, the doctor refused to make any promises. I pressed him. Best case scenario, give me something. If you're lucky, 15. Cross your fingers. Well, that didn't sound good enough. 15 eggs wouldn't even be a sure bet for one kid, and I wanted 2. Ideally, I calculated I needed like 50 eggs minimum. True, no one's probably ever gotten that in the history of egg retrieval, but I wanted numbers that would guarantee results, not maybe, or if I was lucky. Days later, boxes of Gonalef, Menopur, and Centratide arrived and took up all the space in my tiny fridge. I neatly lined up biohazard containers for collecting used needles on my kitchen counter. If any of my neighbors had happened to catch a glimpse in through a window, they must have concluded that I was a heroin addict, but a very meticulous, responsible heroin. For 2 weeks, I injected myself with 3 shots every night, and every other morning I went in for an ultrasound with Dr. Schumanke and assorted groups of international visitors. The morning of the procedure, a little loopy from pre-surgery IV meds, I told the doctor to collect lots of eggs, just like the Easter Bunny. Dr. Schumanke woke me afterwards. Immediately I asked, how many did you get? 9. 9? 9 was what, like half a kid? I was disappointed, and even more disappointed a couple days later when he informed me that only 7 were high enough quality to freeze. It wasn't anywhere near what I had been hoping for, so I decided to do another round a couple weeks later and got 10 more. Then I had to move on with treatment. Cancer makes you readjust your expectations, reevaluate your perspectives. I'm lucky that my situation isn't as dire as others that I've met. I'm lucky to have options, many don't. I had surgeries, radiation, and now I'm on hormone therapy for probably 10 years. So besides things like excruciating hot flashes and insane mood swings, I'm doing okay. Ladies, I have seen the future, and menopause is a bitch. And I'm sure it sounds strange and definitely sort of cheesy, but I almost feel fortunate for this stupid old lady tumor. Well, except for when I'm having one of those mood swings. But this 3.5 centimeter cluster of irregular cells has reminded me to appreciate just what I have. Good luck, bad luck, nothing's ever for sure in life. So I'm just gonna live it as best as I can and try not to think too hard about whether I'm gonna be a green face or a red face, which is all any of us can do, really, and, you know, eat more salads and stuff. For now, what I do have is 17 eggs in a freezer on Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills. Fancy, I know. These are classy eggs, and they're waiting for me.